blocks and barn blocks are always popular with quilters, and they do present some challenges in terms of sewing them together. Hi, I'm Penny Hallgren from quiltblocklibrary.com, and I posted a pattern called Iowa Barn Block, and I got several quilters who said, how do you sew that together? So I thought I would take an opportunity today and sew it together for you. I'm ready to get started, so let's go to the sewing machine. You can also see that these blocks are good for using scrap fabric too, because they're a bunch of different colors and small pieces of each color. So what I'm going to do first here is sew these three pieces together, because those are like really obvious. So I'm just going to flip these right sides together. I'm going to sew this seam and then sew that seam together. Now that I have these three sewn together, it's pretty easy to just lift this up and sew this together, and then we'll have this one entire section put together. That's the barn. Now with our barn sewn together, I could finish this little operation here, but I think what I'm going to do is pick off this corner because it's pretty easy. So I'm going to sew these triangles together, and they're not exactly matching. The shapes don't match exactly, but you can still line up your raw edges here, and then we'll open them up and finish sewing the patch together. These two are sewn together, and you can see I left them hooked together with the stitching, so I'm just going to open them up and then put them right sides together and sew the seam down the center here. Now that I've got this section done, the next step I'm going to do is sew the top on this, and then I'm going to have this whole side finished. The next step here is to sew this sky piece onto the roof. The way this is set up, there's really no way to avoid doing set-in seam kinds of things. So the one that I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my roof and fold it and sew it onto the side of the barn. Now this, instead of sewing all the way to the end here, I'm going to sew to within 1/4 of an inch here, and then I'm going to put this square inside. So now I've got my roof on, and what I'm going to do is sew this onto the roof part first. And I want to have my roof standing out, so I'm going to put my seam allowances behind the roof piece on both sides, and then I'll pin this and sew this part of it first. I'm going to stitch to within 1/4 of an inch of the seam allowance here, so that I'll have the ability to sew this down the side. So now we have the rest of this, and what I'm going to do is sew this unit together and then attach it to the side. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is going to look pretty strange, but I'm going to sew this onto here, just down this seam. I've got this little triangle sewn on, and what I want to do, because I'm going to need to attach this in kind of a set-in seam style as well, I did leave 1/4 of an inch seam allowance open there. So the next step is just to sew this part of it on. And when you sew this seam allowance, it can be sewn all the way to the end, because you're going to sew this on together, which is one strip, and then you're going to angle this to the side. So I am going to, I guess it doesn't really matter which side gets sewn first. So I'm just going to fold it up this way and attach the barn to the sky first, and then I'll come down and attach the barn to the silo. And again, it's sewing your set-in seam. You should be careful to match this seam with where this seam, these two pieces come together in order to make your nice angle. So now I've got the sky sewn onto the top, and I just need to turn this around and stitch down this side, which is going to be pretty easy. As you sew these together, the rest of your block is going to be at kind of strange angles, but just concentrate on your seam and making sure that your raw edges are lined up and the ending pieces are lined up too. You're going to have a little 1/4 of an inch tip that extends beyond the end of this barn. for the silo, and then once you unfold it, it's going to all line up. So there it is. We have all of our pieces sewn together, and yep, there were some set-in seams, but by the time you sew this block together, you'll be an expert at set-in seams. The construction on our Iowa barn block is finished, and here it is. It's all pressed and ready to be included in a quilt. Schoolhouses, houses, and barns do present some additional challenges over just regular pieced blocks, but I really think that they're worth it because they do create some quilts that are very fun and touch the heart in terms of some scenes that you can make with them. Thank you very much for joining me. This is Penny Hallgren from QuiltBlockLibrary.com. And if you're not already at QuiltBlockLibrary.com, be sure to head on over there so that you can get your free download of this Iowa barn pattern. Thanks for joining me. See you next time. Peaceful piecing.